Hi everyone, we are Group 11. Our video is about the European Parliament. This video has four main parts. 1. The involvement of European Parliament. 2nd, the powers and influence of the European Parliament. 3rd, the internal politics of the European Parliament. And finally, elections, members, and reasons for poor voter turnout. Let's start with the involving European Parliament. The European Parliament started life as the Common Assembly of the European Coal and Steel Community in 1952. The Assembly's members were appointed from national legislatures, therefore providing a link with national parliaments. The Assembly's power were limited to dismiss the high authority. The Treaty of Rome was started in 1957 and enacted in 1958. Under the treaty, European Coal and Steel Community Common Assembly became EC Common Assembly. They had the new right to be consulted on legislative proposals. In 1979, also includes the Treaty of Rome, the right for the Assembly to draw up proposals on elections by direct suffrage, so the first direct election was held. Since 1979, direct elections have been held every 5 years, and the European Parliament has seen its powers increase, that it is now regarded as an equal co-legislator with the Council.
The internal politics of the European Parliament. The European Parliament has been characterized as an institution composed of strong committees and weak parties. The committees have been viewed as a key vehicle through which the EP can exercise its legislative prerogatives and hold the EU executive to account. However, as the Parliament's powers have expanded, the political groups have emerged as several more important actors, for it is they who hold the power of patronage within the Parliament and who act as a key conduit between Brussels and national political parties. The EP's political groups are cross-national. In other words, they are composed of members from different countries who share the same broad ideological convictions. The groups play a central role within the EP because they control appointments to positions of responsibility and set the EP's calendar and agenda. As the allocation approached within the EP is determined by group size and within the groups by the size of each national delegation, there are strong incentives to keep these groups together, but allotting posts requires intensive intra- and intergroup negotiation and coordination. The most important positions within the Parliament are the President, who acts as the EP's figurehead, chairing the plenary and representing the Parliament in external negotiations and meetings. The Vice President, who supports the President and help to run the Parliament. The Committee Chairs, who organize and run committee meetings. A key position within the EP is the role of Committee Chair, who is responsible for organizing the calendar and agenda of meetings, chairing meetings and participating in interinstitutional negotiations under the OLP. The role is important because the committees are the locals for the vast majority of parliamentary work, and they play a key role in enabling the Parliament to exercise legislative power and hold the EU's executive to account. Within the committees, MEPs are selected as rapporteurs to draft reports, and their work is aided by shadow rapporteurs, who are drawn from another political group and can fit in alternative political perspectives to the rapporteur and committee. as well as keeping their own party and the wider EP informed about the positions being developed. The rapporteurs and shadow rapporteurs are central members of the team responsible for negotiating within the Council under the OLP. They also play an important role in shaping the position adopted by their political groups as a result of their policy expertise. It might be expected that MEPs would vote according to national preference, forming national blocs regardless of ideological difference. While there are occasional instances of such national divisions, studies of the Parliament's voting behavior show that, as a general rule, the MEPs behave ideologically. In other words, they vote with their political groups, not with their fellow nationals. Hence why the EP is unique as a parliamentary chamber, given its multinational and multilingual composition. To all intents and purposes, behaves as an ordinary parliament, organizing and voting along classic left-right ideological lines. Another prevalent assumption about MEPs is the idea that they go native. That is, they become socialized into a more pro-European perspective, thanks to their experience of living and working among fellow Europeans in an EU decision-making institution. However, evidence shows that becoming an MEP has little impact upon individual preference and voting behavior.
Next, I'm going to discuss about the powers and influence of the European Parliament. So, the forerunner of the European Parliament, which was the European Parliament Assembly, was not directly elected and has limited powers. Its opinion was ignored frequently. The European Parliament has steadily increased its powers by putting pressures on national parties and governments, arguing that it needed increased powers to close the European Union's democratic deficit. For some of you may not know, the concept of democratic deficits within the European Union is the notions that the governance of the European Union lacks democratic legitimacy. The term was initially used to criticize the transfer of legislative powers from national governments to the Council of Ministers of the European Union. The powers of the European Parliament can be divided into three areas. First, it has an influence on the EU budget. Second, it has the right to investigate, appoint, and dismiss the commissions. And third, it has the right to propose legislative proposals to the Commission. Also to adopt, improve, and reject the commissions. So first one is the political powers. There are two main aspects of the ability of the European Parliament to exercise control over the commissions. Powers over the appointment of the College of Commissioners, and powers to dismiss the College if the European Parliament disapproves of their conduct. Therefore, the European Parliament can force the Commissions as a whole to resign by a motion of censure, but to do so requires a positive vote from an absolute majority of the members of the European Parliament and 2/3 of the votes cast. It cannot dismiss individual commissioners. Originally, the European Parliament had no say in the appointment of the commissions. Under successive treaty amendments, it gained the right to elect the government's nomination for president and subsequently hold a vote of consent for the new colleagues of commissioners. Moving on to the second one, which is the budgetary powers. The first big increase in the power of Parliament came with the Treaty of 1970s and 1975. It was now allowed to change the budget within certain limits, reject the budget, have a say on which the commissions spent the amount, and are consulted about agreements with the audit office. However, it was only about compulsory expenditure. That was only about 20% of the total budget. As a result of the Treaty of Lisbon, the distinctions between compulsory and non-compulsory expenditure has disappeared, giving Parliament power over the entire budget. Today, the European Parliament is one half of the bicameral system on the EU budget. For further extent, the budgetary procedures is divided into compulsory item, which mainly agricultural expenditure. European Parliament can only propose modifications to the compulsory items by an absolute majority of its members, and non-compulsory items of expenditure which the European Parliament has the right to amend the draft budget. Our third point is legislative powers. The area in which has changed most since 1979 is the European Parliament's legislative powers. In 1979, it was only allowed to give its opinion on legislations. This was to be ignored by the Council. After this, Parliament could also delay the adoptions of a new law. In 1986, with the introductions of the Single European Act, the Parliament had a cooperation procedure. This gave the European Parliament a second reading of the law and a conditional right of veto. This meant that Parliament could reject a law, but that the Council could draw it out if all member states were unanimous. And if the Commission supported Parliament's improvements, the Council could adopt it through qualitative majority voting, but only rejected by unanimity. So through these cooperations, there was a closer bond between Parliament and the Commissions. Furthermore, in order to create a single market, governments needed to accept the qualified majority voting. This leads to the need for a larger role for the European Parliament in the legislative process to compensate the democratic deficits. Through the ordinary legislative procedure, European Parliament is a sincere co-legislator together with the Council, because agreement is needed from both institutions to adopt a law. So now it covers about 85 policy areas. And if the Parliament or the Council does not want to adopt a law or compromise proposals, the proposals will lapse. The European Parliament also have an ever-increasing role in outlining treaty changes and can therefore bring greater democratic accountability to the process. So, there are four main legislative procedures that operate under the European Council pillar of the European Union. Consultation. The Commission submits a proposal to the Council of Ministers, who is obliged to consult the European Parliament. Cooperations requires the cooperations of the European Parliament. Co-decisions. The most common procedure requires the co-decisions of the European Parliament. Assent. European Parliament can block legislations under this procedure, giving the European Parliament considerable power. To put in a nutshell, in my opinion, the power of European Parliament can be divided into three parts: political, budgetary, and legislative. Here is just a sum up of what I have presented above. If you want to take a look, press pause button. Thank you.
So, as we know, the election to European Parliament was held every 5 years. New Parliament in 2040 has 751 members, called as members of the European Parliament, or MEPs in short. Anyone can be elected, even if they are non-national. They are elected by all the European citizens. The people who are citizens of a country in the European. For example, you are French but living in Germany. You do not have the right to vote in France elections, but still can vote for European elections. Since 1999, European elections have been conducted on the basis of proportional representation across the whole European. As in the election results in 2014, European Parliament had 7 political groups, with EPP or European People's Party group accounted for the largest proportion, with 221 seats. Members of the EP or MEPs come from lots of countries, so they all speak different languages. Unlike other international groups of politicians, MEPs do not sit in groups of countries, but they sit next to people who they share ideas with. The 2 largest groups are the European People's Party, European Democrats, and Party of European Socialists. These groups work together to agree and try to make a law. Party leaders are consulted on the choice of candidates for Commission President following European elections. And national parliaments are now able to block proposed EU legislation. So here is the chart that describes voter turnout in the European Parliament elections in the European Union from 1959 to 2040, and as we can see, the latest elections, 2014, was recorded as the lowest ever voter turnout in the history since EP started direct elections. This problem can be caused by 3 main reasons. The first one is that European elections are second order, so they are viewed as less important than national elections, and voters may use them to express dissatisfaction with the governing party of the state. Secondly, parties also contribute to the problem. And finally, election campaigns are organized and financed by domestic political parties rather than by the European political groups. So, candidates do not seek re-election as a member of political groups in European, but as the French Socialists or German Christian Democrats. And moreover, the parties often campaign on national rather than generously European platform, so it can be caused to the decrease of the voter turnout. During the 2014 election, EP brought into many strategies to boost voter turnout through social media and try to gain more trust from the citizens, but the result is still the worst ever. So our video has 4 parts: the involving European Parliament, the powers and influence of the European Parliament, the internal politics of the European Parliament, and elections, members, and reasons for poor voter turnout. And it's the end of our video. Thanks for watching.